Now that we've gone through some of Goldsmith's strategies on how to overcome that battle with success where we get stuck on a certain level because of our past successes, I wanted to invite my next guest. Joanna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. My name is Joanna, and I am the co founder of a little small agency called Millennial Mktr. We help people build and create courses in Kajabi as well as market and sell them. So I've been an entrepreneur only as my focus for almost 2 years now and have been building that business and agency since.
One of the things that I wanted to discuss with you, because you are in marketing, is that continuous feedback loop where they make a decision and they want to stick with it and they just carry on with that decision, knowing that potentially it's not the right decision, but they're scared to make that switch. And in marketing, we know that we need to learn from everything we're doing. So we're constantly analyzing what we're doing, we're making adjustments, and we're learning. It's not a mistake. We didn't know what the result was going to be most of the time. And we're trying to adjust that to make the right choice for a client, for our campaign, for a company. How do you battle with that? I guess that feedback where you're trying to show the client, hey, this is what's going to be the best for them and allow them that opportunity to be like, okay, we're not wrong. We can switch because they're so stuck in their ways.
I think there's really two key things here that help with that process. And the first starts with setting expectations. So when you start working with them, being clear that we're going to iterate. So if I'm running social media for someone or building a funnel or building a marketing launch, saying this is what we're going to try, then we're going to look at the data and make adjustments for the future. So actually stating that at the beginning and letting people know that, I think really helps get them in that mindset of being able to accept and take feedback. The other thing that I like to do when going through that process of like how to get people to change their mind is when delivering feedback and sharing feedback, I like to take a step outside almost of the nitty gritty project. So, say we're looking at a very specific funnel, and someone says to me, and I'm presenting a different idea that they used to do, and someone's like, well, that's not how I've done it before, right? So, say that conversation comes up. I like to take it a step back and think globally and bring up what I see working across multiple accounts or what I see as a best practice and say, hey, typically that's not something I see work for most of my clients, but what does is this. And that can almost take them outside of feeling like I'm saying your idea is wrong and actually looking at globally, this is what's working. Why don't we try it? We can always change it later. And I think a very specific example of this is one of the things that I find is course creators want to create like 5 different choices when it comes to purchasing a course. So they may build their course and they're like, well, I want 3 tiered options with choice A, choice B, choice C, choice C, D. They got choice E twice. And that's something that happens a lot where there's like too many choices on a sales page that they want. And I always encourage them, let's give them one option, unless there's a really, really good reason to give multiple options. But let's give them one choice because, and I'll say, I find the more decisions we ask someone to make on a sales page, the less likely they're able to make any decision. And instead of saying, you're wrong for doing that, I'm saying like, hey, this is what I find. Want to try it? And then they're much more receptive to changing their mind because I'm not telling them that their past choices were wrong. I'm just saying what I see working right now.
I like that dynamic, and I think it's actually quite funny that it still happens because they're hiring you for a reason. Like what they've been doing hasn't been working, and yet every step of the way, they seem to be questioning your choices on what they have to do. And I find that a lot in marketing. They still feel like they know better because they know their industry, but they question that. So, how do you deal with that sort of feedback with them?
Again, here, I think it starts in 2 parts. We've got the first part is setting them up to get that feedback. So I always like to start my engagement with a client with talking to them about what my role is and what their role is. And in my world, they're the subject matter expert. So there actually are things that I think their choice would trump my choice. Because if we're talking about a very specific content piece, very specific language, I end up working with a lot of like very high level professionals who have PhDs in certain concepts. I don't know how to write about psychiatry. I don't know how to write about medicine. So there are certain things that I'm going to go with them over me. And then there are certain things they should go with me over them. And I try to establish that really early on to make it a very collaborative approach. Hey, for you, this is what I need from you, and this is what I'm going to do. And then it sets it up so when we get to some of those tough feedback points, that they will more likely listen to me on my things because I've listened to them on their things. And whenever we get into a situation where my client wants to do something that I don't recommend, I'll always give them the why. I know for me, when I know the why with feedback, when someone just says, delete that, I don't like it, I don't have a great reaction. Like, I'm like, ugh. Then it almost makes me want to dig in and do it more. Right. But if they say, like, hey, this is feeling this way to me. Um, how can we adjust it? And we collaborate, I'm going to be much more receptive of that feedback myself. So when client gives feedback or a change to a funnel or something we're doing, and I don't agree with it from a marketing perspective, I might say, like, hey, this is why it's this way. Tell me what you don't like. And I try to just understand more, and then we can collaborate together. I can understand what they don't like about the choice that I made. They can understand why I made that choice. And then we can potentially rework it in a way that meets marketing best practices and fulfills their reason for wanting to change it. And I find in most cases, like 9 times out of 10, if there are those types of disagreements, we end with something that still meets what it needs to, but adds their feedback in it. Now, from time to time, you come across clients who want it the way they want it. And sometimes at the end of the day, we will build or create what they want, even if we don't agree. But I actually always will tell them that. If we've iterated way too far off from a format that I think is going to be successful, I'll let them know that. And I'll say, like, hey, if you wanted to change these 5 things, that's outside of what I recommend on a sales page or a funnel or social post or whatever it is. I'm happy to do this to you. Just know that I don't feel confident like I can say you're going to get the results you desire. And I just let them know that. And sometimes they want to do it anyway. And for a lot of the work I do, sometimes at that point it's their choice. If we're building something and it's theirs to use and they want it a specific way, I'll concede at some point.
I can see that that is actually one of Goldsmith's 20 things that hinder your success, whereby they are getting in front of their own success because they have a level of comfort with what they've done before. And that's the reason why they're asking you to do something very specific, because they've seen maybe some success in it previously. But I always question that, where I'm like, you've hired somebody to help you change, to help you level up. Why wouldn't you try something new? And I feel like that's what's stopping them. Going back to the start of the relationship, so once you've hired them, it's easier to have those hard conversations and encourage that clear communication, which I always think is key to any part of business, having you being understood, but also understanding the other side. When you're starting the first conversation with somebody and they're looking to engage you and hire you for your services, I know that I often find myself I want to help them. I'm like, oh my God, I see everything that you're going through. I want to overshare so much and I want to provide so much value. How do you stop yourself from providing what could be classified as too much value? Or is there such a thing?
That's a really good question. And I think I've definitely at times done way too much. I also have a really bad habit of doing more for my clients than they pay me to do. And then I'm like, wait, why am I so busy? And I'm like, oh wait, I just did like 5 hours of work on something that wasn't even their scope of work because I just want it done right. So that's not the question you asked me, but that's what I thought of. But on like your sales calls, discovery calls, there's a couple things I do to make sure I don't overvalue, but provide enough value so that people want to work with me. The first thing I like to think about is I can share the strategy without sharing the implementation, right? So if someone wants a custom built funnel, I can talk through and tell them, like, this is what I'd recommend for your funnel. Start here, go here, do this, do that. If the person's on the call with me, they likely don't know how to implement that themselves. So if I can show that I have the vision for what they need and what's going to work for their business, but I don't literally click in and tell them exactly what to do, then they'll be paying me to actually implement and execute on that strategy. And that's what that proposal would be for. So share the strategy, share the why even, but don't give them the implementation. Don't literally log into their account and do it for them, or like send them a YouTube video on how to do it themselves, right? Like you're going to sell the implementation of it. And for me and for my business style, that works really well. The next thing that I'll do is I book discovery calls for 30 minutes and I don't go over that time. If we start getting into the weeds of strategy and have not landed on what they need, like what we have for a proposal, I'll recommend a paid strategy session. So I'll say, hey, it sounds like you're not quite sure what your business needs yet. Maybe they've built their course or their thing. I'll say, why don't we get on a call? We can specifically review X funnel or Y site, or review your offer. Like, you don't know what your course offer is, what should it be? And actually do a paid strategy call. So that way I'm getting paid for that time if we're going to go beyond like an initial discovery call where we're still talking about strategy. I find people are actually very open to that. Like when I first started that, I thought I'd get a lot of pushback, but sometimes people even ask me for that. They're like, we got on the call, this was great, but I need some more help before I can do a project with you. Why don't we talk strategy? And that works really well. And then they, might purchase something else down the road.
Yeah, I like those three things where people often lose that opportunity to essentially upsell from a consultation that doesn't sell them on the end product, but provides the clarity that the client needs in order to proceed with the project. And it's seeing that they don't have enough information to engage with you. Hey, let me get you to a place where you have sufficient information to make a decision, whether that is with me as your provider or you choose another way. Another thing that came through with that conversation that you were just having was you sell the result as well. Like, don't go into the nitty gritty of the process. This is the strategy that we're taking. This is the overall result, which is what most people want to see. Like, what can you do for me? How is that going to help me? Something that the book has come across, and I like that you said, I spent 5 hours doing something that I wasn't engaged because I could do it right. I wanted it done right. It's those beliefs in ourselves that often keep us in certain areas, and we're like, that's just who I am. I provide that extra bit of work just because I want to provide value to my client. So, besides that example that you gave, is there anything else that you've come across that you've been able to stop yourself from, like, that's just who I am, this is where it's going, this is what I need to be, this is the role that I need to be in, to shift that mindset in essence and help you overcome that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think I'm a new person from month to month. I always try to look at what I'm doing, see what I'm doing that's holding me back, and work towards just being a better business owner, being a better leader, being a better boss. And I think that the example you brought up is a really good one. Is something I'm learning this year is like, how do I not just do the work? And my business partner once said to me, well, like, what would happen if you didn't do it? And I'm like, oh, everything would fall apart. And he's like, no, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. So I think, one, actually, with that, having really good people in your life to get feedback with that you trust, I think is really, really important to see those things. So learning how to not over deliver time and time again, and actually saying like, hey, I noticed you might need these 5 things. It'll take this much time of work. Would you like us to do it for you? Right? Like actually asking. And then if they say yes, it's an upsell. If they say no, they know that it has to be done and they can do it themselves, right? They can make that choice. I think the harder things to deal with, I think like implementation and actions are really easy, but more personality things can be harder to deal with, about like delivery and how you're getting your point across. And something that I struggled with a bit earlier in my career, not so much now, but a bit earlier in my career, was the way I come across, like when sharing feedback, like being too harsh or talking too much or being too critical. Like these are all things, maybe like jumping to conclusions a little bit. This is all feedback that I've gotten in my life. And a lot of times when I first hear it, I'm like, I'm not like that. Like, I don't do that, right? You want to like be like, no, that's not me. But I think it's really important to take that feedback. You don't have to take every piece of feedback and run with it, but just really evaluate. Like, when I'm delivering feedback, am I too harsh? Am I not understanding? And these things people are bringing to me, let me like really think about it. Now, people give feedback for all kinds of reasons. It may be good or bad, but it's important, I think, to evaluate it, think about it, and maybe try applying some of those changes and seeing how people react. And here's a really good example of this in my recent year is I have a tendency to like see patterns. And a lot of times I'm right with how people are going to respond to things. But thinking people are going to react poorly or thinking things aren't going to work out doesn't help your outcomes. It doesn't. So I really started working on like, if I'm delivering a piece of feedback or I'm sharing something, to not think in my head, oh, this person's going to take it badly, or, oh, it's going to take them a week to respond, and just start trying to deliver it with the mindset that I'm going to get what I want in return. And that has greatly increased the positive reactions I get. I don't even know, in my head, I don't think I'm delivering anything differently. I'm sure I am. Like, I'm sure I am doing something differently, but I'm thinking about my mindset towards that, and it is affecting the outcomes.
I think that that is a prime example of past successes where you were able to see a pattern and identify a reaction hindering future success, where you just assume that because certain things are present, that that's the reaction that you're going to see. Thank you so much, Joanna, for being here today. If anybody wants to reach back out to you, whether engage with yourself or with your company, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so you can visit my website, www.millennialmktr.com, or you can just email me directly, joanna@millennialmktr.com.
Are they also able to find you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, TikTok. My company has a YouTube channel, so there's different ways that you can engage.
Amazing. Thank you again. And I hope you guys join us next week.